Hi, my name is Zianna Follows Gone,
I'm Devany Ayala.
I'm Gabrielle Ramirez.
I'm Maribelle.
and today we are presenting our final project for the ethnic studies. So let's get into it. America, although one of the most youngest countries, many individuals would like to move here for a variety of reasons. For some, it's seen as a place of new beginnings and opportunities, as well as a better place for their families. Others may also seek refuge here as well. However, it may not be as it seems. Of course, there are many challenges as well as stereotypes, such as the minority myth, which we'll cover later, that lead to such issues such as the deportation and the incarceration of many people. Today, we are focusing on the Asian American community. The question today is, how does the minority myth and the pursuit of the American dream lead up to the incarceration and deportation of the Asian American community? We'll first cover some points on what that dream is, and then we'll move on to cover some points on how the pursuit could lead to the incarceration of the Asian Americans in our country. As said before, some people come to America for refuge, such as victims of the Vietnam and Korean wars, as well as many other wars. Many immigrants also come to achieve something called the American dream. But what is that? The phrase was first said in 1931 by a businessman and historian named James Truslow Adams. He said, quote, "A dream of a social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortunate circumstances of birth or position." Though this definition of the dream has changed over the years and are defined differently by some people. Kristen de Guzman, for example, is a first generation Filipino American that defines the American dream as living a life that makes the sacrifices of her parents made in their own lives worth it. However, of course, this dream is easier thought than done, as there are many challenges that are to be faced, such as the immigration process, which could take months, if not years, to complete, averaging and it's averaging about 10.8 months currently. Then after that process, there's isn't really a guarantee for jobs. There's also the pressure that some receive from their families, the pressures from others and their self to fit in, and of course the pressure of what is known as the minority myth. The minority myth is defined as a minority group or a member of such a group stereotypically viewed as being more successful than other groups or individuals. On top of all of that, not many are able to visit their homelands once they leave. It is also hard as there are many of them are first-time Americans, meaning there is no family here to help them, leaving them with very little support. But how could this lead to the incarceration and deportation?
There are two ways immigrants decide to come to the US, which are voluntarily to become laborers, entrepreneurs, and professionals, or they come here because they are fleeing their country due to outside forces, whether political or religious, or simply fleeing their war-torn countries such as Vietnam, Afghanistan, Rwanda, the Secret War in Laos, or the war against Khmer regime in Cambodia. Socioeconomic means push people to immigrate, as well as the displacement war causes, especially those that the United States were a part of. During the displacement of refugees, specifically the refugees that were displaced during the Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodian War, there were no regulated systems for resettling immigrants or people in search of asylums. In this picture, you see the basic and general process that immigrants would go through coming to the US and what they go through as they're here being processed in the US. Subcontracted nonprofit agencies oversaw helping the State Department as there was payment involved for organizations for their help with resettling refugees. If you're working at a refugee agency and your job is to house these people, house them together and house them quickly with very little money, you're going to look for apartment buildings that have a lot of vacancy and that will rent to you for cheap and will keep people together, accounts Eric Tane, a professor of diaspora studies. Oftentimes, the place that refugees were resettled to were low income and had people of the same position as theirs around them in those neighborhoods. In this case, they were placed in derelict apartments that were no better than their previous means of living. A large portion of immigrants, both legal and undocumented, leave their homes in search of improved economic opportunities. However, it can be one of two ways. One group consists of educated and skilled who have substantial financial resources in their home countries in search of enhancing their career opportunities, while the other consists of those with minimal education, if they received any, and skills and material resources, and migrate here to accept relatively menial jobs that nevertheless provide economic improvement. If immigrants were forced to come to the US to find refuge or were not well off in their home country, they were left with little to nothing to live off of, and in the 1980s and to the 2000s, many lived in working poverty, and at its height during that time were dispersed $200 to $300 checks per month. Being a part of low-income communities also means having inadequate resources in public school in the area, which ultimately creates a failure to meet the needs to execute educating students clearly and causing students to disengage in their education and drop out from school, contributing to the school to prison pipeline. The school to prison pipeline is a lack of support to at-risk children, which then pushes them out of school towards entering the criminal justice system. Once immigrants commit a crime, they then become a risk of being deported due to the 1996 U.S. Immigration Act called the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act. The IIRIRA strengthened U.S. immigration laws, adding penalties for undocumented immigrants who committed crimes and would then be deported for committing a misdemeanor or felony.
The current situation. There has been a rise in arrest and deportation of undocumented individuals within the Southeast Asian American refugee community. Many of these refugees have already claimed the United States as their home, have children or family who are U.S. citizens, and gain lawful permanent resident status. In 2017, ICE committed one of the largest nationwide raids targeting and arresting 100 Cambodian Americans, 456 Vietnamese, and 193 Lao Americans. Many undocumented, specifically Southeast Asians, face double punishment and are at risk of deportation after being incarcerated. Since the 1996 IIR-IRA, these communities are 3 to 4 times more likely to be deported for old convictions compared to other immigrant groups. 16,000 Southeast Asian Americans from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam have received final orders for deportation. 13,000 of them are due to old criminal convictions. The model minority myth and its harmful stigmas towards Asians have created a lack of data to be logged regarding the imprisonment of Asian ethnicity. Asian Americans are depicted to be more privileged and more successful than other minorities, which results in delegitimizing the struggles they face or failures to create programs or address issues regarding criminal activity in their communities. Many prisons categorize Asians in an other category along with white, Hispanic, and Black, despite being asked to report their ethnicity from a list of 28 ethnicity types, according to a 2018 report from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, resulting in 6.8% of the total federal inmate population. This myth also plays a huge part in the Asian youth who are battling the pressures and social stigmas and expectations from their parents and society. Due to these social stigmas, the school systems fail the refugee and Asian students by ignoring the needs or outcasting those who do not fit the stigma's mold. Without adequate resources to help them thrive and support their transition into the States, many of these youth find an outlet into gangs for protection and community, which puts them at risk for criminalization, resulting in deportation. Not only do refugee youth not have support from their educators, but some live with minimal parental supervision due to the harsh realities of their environment. Many of their parents work multiple low-income jobs, others battle addiction due to their traumatized past, become victims of the school to prison to deportation pipeline. KQED covered a story of 4 employees abdicating their rights to Governor Gavin Newsom to stay in the United States. These employees worked for the Asian Prisoner Support Committee, which supported formerly incarcerated APIs. Currently, Ali Bori, Shantan Bun, Najib Yam, and Maria Laguda are felons who have lost their legal permanent resident status and have been issued removal orders. The one testimony we have chosen to cover in this presentation is Ali Bori. Ali's family fled the Khmer regime and was born in Thailand in a refugee camp. On January 17, 1989, 8-year-old Ali was part of an event that changed his life forever. A white supremacist named Patrick Purdy fired 105 rounds on the playground of Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California, killing 5 children, one of them being Ali's cousin. All the victims of the mass shooting were Cambodian and Vietnamese immigrant children. He knew then that he was not wanted in this country. Ollie's life in the U.S. left him angry and fearful. To avoid being beat up or racial harassment, he would often change his routes when walking to school. Ollie's father was a drug addict and would disappear for months at a time, leaving Ollie alone. At age 12, Ollie joined a neighborhood gang, which became his new family. At 14, at 14, Ollie and his friends tried to rob a convenience store in San Jose, which resulted in the store owner's death. The store owner tried to grab Ollie's gun and it fired. He turned himself in months later. At 15, Ollie was tried as an adult and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He was considered one of the state's youngest lifers. Ollie served 19 years and was granted parole, and instead of being released, he was picked up by the ICE. Now at age 41, Ollie wears an ankle monitor and he knows his life here in the United States is limited. He is at risk of being deported to Cambodia, a country that is foreign to him. Asian youth may receive less sentencing time than white offenders, but are more likely to be tried as an adult for their crimes. This was an example in Ollie's case. Deportation of those with criminal convictions have risen to 13%, while deportations without them rose 174% in the 2017 fiscal year. From years 2017 to 2018, Cambodian refugee communities suffered a 279% increase in deportation.
We can help those who have been formerly incarcerated by allowing education for them because prisoners in educational programs while incarcerated are 43% less likely to recidivate than those who do not. We can also help them by creating a prison to jobs pipeline for formerly incarcerated. This can be done by bandbox, which is the removal of questions on applications about previous convictions, also encouraging civic engagement by expanding their voting rights. Specifically, this bill prohibits the detention and deportation of Southeast Asian refugees who arrived in the U.S. before 2008, permanently authorizes employment for those with final orders of removal so they can make a living and support their families, and establish virtual ICE check-ins rather than in-person check-ins or at the frequency of every 5 years, reunite families that have been deported by bringing them back to the U.S. A high population of Vietnamese youth residents are surveyed what they want to learn in school according to a virtual listening session hosted by the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center. For decades, there has been very little outreach from politicians or public officials on the local and state needs in order to support the education of Southeast Asian American students who struggle with bullying, language barriers, culture relevant support, and intergenerational struggle that leads to the school to prison pipeline. This leads to issues of lack of racial identity and proper assimilations. The Orange County Department of Education was one of the county offices of education chosen to initiate the development of the Southeast Asian curricula. This bill is known as the SB 895. According to the survey, the Vietnamese Americans were interested in learning about refugee experience, Cambodian genocide, Hmong history, and cultural studies. This bill conveys the new law to model the representation of these cultural disparities in education in 2018. This bill also led to other key bills, such as AB 101, where high school students take ethnic studies before graduating, AB 167, which allocated $1.2 million to fund Southeast Asian model curricula. Other ways to support this group is the lack of jobs. There are lack of jobs due to discrimination of Asian can lead to poverty and criminalization. Therefore, we should add more Asian American employee resource groups to guide against this racial bias. We can also support this group by controlling the proximity of police surveillance in Asian neighborhoods by promoting the rights of private property. We can also do this by increasing Asian mental health professionals to help solve the issue of language barriers and facilitate therapy relationships with individuals within the mental health communities. Another way to support is to repeal the 1996 Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which restricts due process and fairness for many immigrants and refugees with criminal conviction.